It's 6 p.m. on Monday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. These are the top stories we're following this evening. In response to allegations that Korea's spy agency illegally conducted surveillance on civilians, the NIS chief puts his job at stake. And the Korean government teams up with local companies with the intention of creating over 200,000 jobs for the youth by 2017. And today marks the 62nd anniversary of the Korean War armistice. We take a look at what this day means and what we can expect in the future as the truce remains between the two Koreas. The head of Korea's spy agency puts his job on the line in response to allegations that his organization carried out an illegal surveillance on civilians. This was according to an unnamed lawmaker outside the National Assembly's closed-door Intelligence Committee meeting today. National Intelligence Service Director Byung-ho is also reported to have said that the controversial hacking program purchased from an Italian company, the remote control system, is incapable of tapping into the KakaoTalk mobile messaging system, a smartphone application widely used in Korea. The recent revelation that the NIS purchased a hacking program resulted in allegations of spying on civilians. Regarding documents deleted by its employee before his apparent suicide amid the hacking scandal, the spy agency said all the restored documents showed there was no surveillance on South Korean civilians. Shifting gears, as the Korean government prepares to declare an end to the MERS virus that hit the nation about 2 months ago, the last remaining person under quarantine was released today. Our Han Da-eun has the latest.
A nurse infected with the MERS virus by a patient she treated at the National Medical Center has been released from quarantine as of midnight Monday. She was the last person under quarantine. The number of suspected patients quarantined peaked on June 18th, reaching nearly 6,730, but continued to decline during the past month before zeroing out on Monday, 68 days since the first case was confirmed in May. As no new cases have been confirmed for 22 consecutive days, the Health Ministry is set to hold a meeting presided over by Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn Tuesday, declaring a technical end to the MERS outbreak. The final tally of MERS cases stands at 186, with 36 deaths. Health Ministry officials are also expected to encourage citizens to resume their normal lives without concerns, as the virus no longer poses a threat to general society. The official end to the virus, however, is expected to be announced at the end of next month, as the World Health Organization suggests a period of 28 days after all of the remaining MERS patients test negative in diagnostic tests. Currently, 12 MERS patients remain in Korea, with 11 testing negative. One patient who has shown mixed results is set to undergo further testing this week. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
One of Japan's largest corporations, Mitsubishi Materials, has now expressed its intention to offer apologies to Chinese prisoners, and actually did for American prisoners during World War II. But the situation is not the same for Korean laborers. Kim Ji-yeon tells why.
An outside director of Japan-based Mitsubishi Materials Corporation drew the line when it came to extending an apology to Korean laborers. In an editorial to the Sankei Shimbun Monday, Yukio Okamoto said the legal situation of Koreans is different from that of other prisoners of war, such as the U.S., Britain, and Australia. Okamoto argued Koreans were technically Japanese citizens and were treated the same as all Japanese workers during the period. This is in stark contrast to the corporation's apology to surviving World War II prisoners of war and family members in the U.S. last week, as well as its stance regarding Chinese laborers. In the same Sankei article, Okamoto said the company views Chinese laborers in the same light as American forced laborers. He did add that it would take longer to resolve issues with the Chinese, as descendants are suing for financial reparations, a reference to the company's settlement announced last week to pay $16,000 per person in compensation to 3,765 victims of forced labor in China. Korean civic groups say the private corporation needs to discard its double standard on wartime atrocities and requested that a similar apology be made. Korea's Gwangju High District Court ordered Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Limited in June to pay 5 Koreans a total of $482,000, which the company appealed. It's estimated nearly 6,500 Koreans were forced to work for Mitsubishi-owned companies since the country was colonized by Japan in 1910. Kim Jung, Arirang News.
Now, nuclear envoys from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will meet in Tokyo later this week to discuss North Korea's nuclear issues. The three countries on Friday are expected to discuss comprehensive ways to pressure Pyongyang and bring the regime back to the denuclearization talks. This comes as part of U.S. nuclear envoy Sidney Seiler's three-nation trip to South Korea, China, and Japan this week. Seiler, currently in Seoul, is reportedly holding talks with his counterpart Kim Gon on ways to deal with Pyongyang's nuclear provocations. The six-party denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, have been stalled since 2008. Today marks the 62nd anniversary of the signing of the armistice agreement, which resulted in the ceasefire of the devastating Korean War, lasting from 1950 to 1953. A ceremony was held at Panmunjom earlier today, the historic site where the armistice agreement was signed. Arirang's Kim Hyun-bin follows this report.
The Korean War started on June 25, 1950. When North Korea forces, supported by the Soviet Union and China, launched a surprise invasion of South Korea. Over the course of the resulting conflict, 21 UN member states came to the defense of South Korea, with the U.S. providing the vast majority of the UN's military personnel. After a bloody back and forth that lasted slightly more than 3 years, an armistice agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, closing one of the most harrowing chapters in Korea's modern history. Some 180,000 South Korean and allied troops lost their lives in the Korean War. But those numbers pale in comparison to the estimated 1 million South Korean civilians that died or went missing. The losses were devastating, but their sacrifices will forever be remembered, as they give South Koreans what they enjoy today: freedom and a prosperous nation. To commemorate the 62nd anniversary, a ceremony was held on Monday at the joint security area of Panmunjom, the very location where the agreement was signed in 1953 by military delegates from the UN Command, North Korea, and China. Deputy Commander of the UN Command took the moment to mention the importance of the command's role in the region, especially when dealing with the Communist North.
Today, the armistice reflects the enduring commitment to the international community to preserve peace and stability. Its maintenance continues to be a complex task, especially when noting the provocative actions of North Korea. The nation's pursuit of nuclear weapons, long-range ballistic missiles, and proliferation of weapons in violation of UN Security Council resolutions continue to threaten stability in this region and in the world.
The ceremony not only serves to mark the signing of the armistice agreement, it's also a solemn reminder that the two Koreas are technically still at war. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Panmunjom.
And to mark this occasion, our Hwang Sung-hee sat down with U.S. Congressman Charles Rangel, a Korean War veteran himself, for his views on the war and hopes for the two Koreas going forward.
So, Congressman, how do you remember the Korean War?
I try not to remember the Korean War. I was 60 years ago, 65 years ago. And it was a nightmare, a nightmare. I try not ever to think about the tens of thousands of Koreans, Americans, and people from over 20 countries being killed. But if you talk about stopping communism and the Republic of Korea blossoming to become an anchor of democracy in that area, then I wish the war wasn't necessary. But there's no question that God has been good to Korea in the recovery.
You've been honored as a war hero. How has your participation in the Korean War changed you?
Having the type of casualties that we had You wonder, why did we survive with all of the wounded and the deaths that took place? So there's a sense of guilt because the heroes are the people that gave their lives. Their families have changed, and they're not here to see the results of that war. I can never think of a more gracious people than the South Koreans, because wherever I go, there's flowers, there's medals, there's recognition, and I really accept it for those who lost their lives.
As a man who fought in the Korean War, how do you assess the current situation of the divided Koreas?
How that imaginary line, that 38th parallel, can divide cultures and people with the same blood. I didn't volunteer to say, take me to Korea, I want to get involved in a war. But I did get involved. And I have an investment in Korea, not by choice. And I have an opportunity, not as just a guy on the street saying what a sad story, but a senior man in the Congress, and being able to say to the North Koreans, what's more important than bringing your Korean people together?
You are one of the longest serving House member in the U.S. Congress. What would you like to see the most happen on the Korean Peninsula before your term as a U.S. Congressman comes to an end?
I hope that one day, no matter how strong a communist is, that they think about their children, their grandchildren, the value of peace over warfare. And I hope that that happens while I'm in Congress, and I'll be working through those goals if I'm not in Congress. I can't make a major change, but I can be a part of that, working toward that goal, and I enjoy doing it.
Thank you, Congressman, for your time today.
Kamsahamnida, it's been a pleasure being with you.
Now, a new record for the number of unemployed youth in Korea has been set in the first 6 months of this year, with some even calling the situation catastrophic. In response, the government rolled out yet another set of measures to help quell the dire situation in the youth job market, already the sixth of its kind under the current administration. Shin Se-min reports.
Ko Sung-myung is a 26-year-old college senior with no full-time job lined up, and like many of his generation, he's anxious.
I hear that the job market is in critical condition, with thousands unable to find work. All I can do is just continue submitting resumes.
The number of young, jobless Koreans has increased sharply, tallying 410,000 during the January-June period this year, up 100,000 in just the past 2 years. And although the number of young Koreans that managed to find jobs increased by 56,000 last year, the majority of the work was unstable and temporary, with contracts set to expire within a year or two. In order to quell the rising youth unemployment rate, Korea's Finance Ministry announced a new set of measures with the goal of creating 200,000 new jobs by 2017. The measures consist of 75,000 full-time jobs from public and private sectors, while over 125,000 will be internships at private firms. The ministry hopes to boost the employment rate by 1.8 percentage points as a result.
We hope these new measures help remove problems that our young people go through while giving hope to our future generations.
The government and the heads of the 6 business organizations have agreed to work hand in hand on providing new jobs.
It's a catastrophic situation. Governmental measures and policies are not enough to resolve the issue. Private corporations should be required to create more jobs, as encouragement isn't enough.
Experts also point out that a new set of measures to help highly educated young Koreans cope is another necessity in the current job market, and added that the jobs secured by the government should be long-term quality jobs. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, such government measures comes amid some gloomy outlook. Korea's GDP per capita may drop for the first time in 6 years due to slow economic growth and the weakening local currency. The Seoul-based LG Economic Research Institute forecasts the figure will dip to $27,600 this year, down from last year's $28,100. This dampens the government's hopes of reaching a per capita GDP of more than $30,000 this year. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned and goodbye for now.